Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be going through all my recent reads, which is essentially every book that I read this summer. I haven't done a wrap up since May. So yeah, these are all the books that I read this summer. I've got 14 books to share with you in total. I was in a huge reading slump throughout all of summer, to be honest. I didn't read too many books. 14 is still a decent number, but I would have liked to have read more, and I am 10 books behind on my Goodreads reading challenge goal. So, not an ideal situation, but that's where we're at. I feel like I'm coming out of the slump now, but I thought I would still share all the books that I read this summer. And a lot of them, to be honest, are quite forgettable. And I only had two 5 stars, and they were both right at the end of August. So I'm going to go through these in the order that I read them, because I think if I do what I usually do and go through lowest rated to highest rated, I'm going to get confused between what I've spoke about, what I haven't. So I think just going in the order that I read them is the best idea for me right now. So, starting off, the first book that I finished in June was In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which I rated 4 stars. I really liked this. We read this for my family's book club. You're going to see quite a few mentions of the book club here. This was our May pick that I finished at the start of June because we spoke about it at the start of June. And it follows these two boys. Well, they're boys to begin with, and we watch them grow up into young men. They are at this boarding school, and we follow them initially. They are called Elwood and Gaunt, and they end up going to fight in World War One. And it's their love story, but it's a very complicated love story because they have to go through all the trauma of war and fighting in war and losing friends and losing people around them, having to witness death all the time, having to witness torture, go through torture. It is hell. And it is quite graphic, the detail that goes into this when it comes to certain scenes of fighting in the war. But it's so, so good. And I liked how realistic this was. I feel like if they'd had this really happy relationship, it was all like sunshine and roses, it just wouldn't have made sense on the backdrop of where we are in this book. It is a difficult relationship. They both have their individual struggles, and it's really hard for them. I really enjoyed this. The reason why I didn't give it a 5 is because, and this might sound a bit silly, but I was expecting to feel more emotionally impacted than I did. I don't know whether it's because I didn't feel fully connected to our two main characters. I think if I felt a little bit more connected to them, I would have found the overall story a lot more emotional, but I didn't. So I ended up rating this one a 4 instead of a 5, but I still really enjoyed it and I would highly recommend it. It's very different for war fiction, like World War One historical fiction. I know a lot of people try and avoid that, but I would say give this one a go because while it is a historical fiction, we are also following this beautiful romance between these two men. Next, and I will say a lot of these I don't actually own physically anymore. I got rid of all the ones that I didn't particularly enjoy that much. So the next one that I read was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes by Eric LaRocca, which I rated a 3 star, but looking back, I think I might lower it because I I can remember the main story of Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, but the other stories in this, couldn't tell you what they were about. And I went into this one mainly wanting to read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke because I'd heard such mixed things and people saying how bizarre and strange this is, which it very much is. And yeah, I was very intrigued. So I picked that one up, and it was just a bit too odd for me, I think. I found it funny though. So parts of it actually cracked me up, and I wasn't expecting that. It was just so strange. I remember reading parts out to my boyfriend, and he was like, "What are you reading?" And I was like, "I know, it's just odd." Anyway, so essentially, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke is a short story that follows these two women that meet in this chat room. One of the women is selling an apple peeler and the other woman wants it. They start this conversation and they end up forming this weird contract. And the things that one in particular gets the other to do is just bizarre. And it all goes from there. And it's just, I think it probably is the strangest story that I have ever read. and I don't know whether I liked it or not. I didn't hate it. Some people say you either love it or hate it. I didn't love it and I didn't hate it. So I feel like that does really place me in the middle. But I don't know if it's worthy of a 3 now that I'm looking back. But anyway, yeah, so I read that one and I was slightly disappointed. Then I read Reckless by Elsie Silver, which is the 4th book in the Chestnut Spring series. We are following Theo and Winter. Theo is mentioned a lot in the first book. He is kind of under Rhett from the first book's wing. He's this young cowboy, and it's a few years on from that first book, so he's a bit older now. And Winter is Summer from the first book's older sister, and she's seen as quite mean in the first few books. She's not really the most likable character, but we're essentially following these two as they have this one night stand. They both really like each other, they're both really attracted to each other. They have this one night stand, and Winter ends up pregnant, which I don't feel like is a spoiler. I feel like everyone talks about that fact. She ends up pregnant, so it is an accidental pregnancy trope, which I know a lot of people dislike. I quite like that trope, and I really liked it in here. I think that the reasons why it's also like a secret baby, but the reasoning behind why it's a secret baby makes so much sense. It's not a silly, immature reason. I don't like it when it's like that, but for this, it makes sense. If you read it, or if you have read it, you'll understand what I mean. But this is a really, really cute romance. I think this is my second favourite of the series. Nothing can beat Heartless, to be honest, but this is a very strong second. I really liked the relationship between these two. I like how much more mature Theo is and how much he steps up once he realises that he is a dad. And I also really liked how much growth we had with Winter. Like, obviously, she's a very unlikable character to begin with, but this really explores the reasons why and shows us why she is the way that she is. And in the end, I ended up really, really liking her, and she is one of my favourite characters in the series now. I thought this was really, really good. I loved it. And yeah, I'm going to be mentioning the final book in this series as well, so we've got more to come from Elsie Silver in this video. But yeah, this was a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and I rated this one 3 stars. It was another disappointment for me, to be honest, because it started off so strong. We're essentially following this woman called Kit. She is a caregiver, and right at the beginning of the book, we find out she was previously suspended from her job, and she's now coming back. And the job that she is given is to look after this woman called Lenora Hope in this mansion. And Lenora Hope is known by the town for killing her entire family, but she was never convicted for it. But the town widely speculate and believe that that was the case. She's even got like these like song and rhymes that children sing about her to suggest that that's what she did. And so Kit goes there, and Lenora decides to tell Kit her story, but Lenora can only use one of her hands. She doesn't have any movement in the rest of her body, so she's typing everything out on a typewriter. I think it's set in the 80s. She's typing everything out on a typewriter just using the one hand, so Kit is slowly learning what happened. And we do get chapters from Lenora when she's younger and her family and everything going on. I really, as I said, enjoyed the beginning of this. I liked the premise and I thought I was gonna love it, but it got to a point where it was feeling quite monotonous, and it wasn't repetitive, but it just felt like I was getting nowhere as I was reading it, and it seemed to take me so long to get through despite it not being that long of a book. So I would say the beginning was great, middle really slowed down for me, and I was getting a bit bored. And then the twist I did not see coming in the slightest. So I thought that that was really good, but it wasn't enough for me to absolutely love it. I feel like that middle section really ruined this book for me. I think I just said I rated it 3 stars. I rated it 3.5. I think the twist bumped it up that little bit more. But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment because I was expecting to rate this one 5 stars. That being said, I think if it sounds intriguing to you, then definitely give it a go, because it might have been my reading slump that was the issue rather than the book. Another book that I rated 3.5 stars was The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. This was another family book club book. And this was a really sweet story, but the reason why I didn't fully love it is because I feel like it's just a little bit forgettable, and I can't really remember too much about this one other than the fact that we're following Eddie, who on his birthday, he's an old man. On his birthday, he dies and he goes to heaven. There are these five people that meet him in heaven who have all shaped his life in some way, or he has shaped theirs. And it's a very interesting premise, and it was a really good one to discuss actually. Some of the people that you meet, it's really interesting to see the impact that's made, because Eddie himself, particularly one of them that I'm thinking of, he doesn't know the person at all, but there's something about this person that just had a huge impact on his life. So it's really interesting. I did like it, but as I say, it's a little bit forgettable. Not one that I'm really going to go back to, but it was a fun time while I was reading it. Then it's a shame we've got another disappointment. I read an arc for a novel love story by Ashley Poston, and I read this just before it came out in June. And yeah, I rated it 3 stars. I didn't love it. I think I was expecting so much because I loved The 7 Year Slip last year, but this one didn't quite work for me. We're following this woman who essentially ends up in the town of her favourite book series and meets this guy, and it's all very well and good, but it just didn't. I didn't like the overall storyline, didn't love our main character. Um, and it's another forgettable one. As I say, I can't really fully remember things. The only things I can remember are spoilery, and a lot of it is to do with our love interest. As like I say, I didn't really love our main character, but the love interest I found worse. Didn't like him. And yeah, just not my favourite, which was a shame. I'm still going to read. I've got the Dead Romantics on my shelves. I still want to read. And I will still definitely pick up more from this author because The 7 Year Slip was just outstanding for me. So I do think that this author definitely has another 5 star for me, but this one just wasn't my favourite, unfortunately. Next, I read Night Shift by Annie Crown. This was another 3 star, but this is one that was just, I read it and it was a fun time. I wasn't really expecting much from it, but I did read it really quick, and for my reading slump, that was ideal. It's essentially this new adult romance between Kendall and Vincent. Kendall works in the library. Vincent is on the basketball team, and he comes in. I think he's wanting some poetry, and she shows him where it is. They end up kissing against the bookshelves. It's all very sneaky, but she's not really like that. She's not into partying. She's a bookworm. She is a little bit nerdy. She's not like her. So her roommates, they go out, they party quite a bit because they're in college. She doesn't. But yeah, it's this romance between these two. It's kind of like an opposites attract kind of thing. It was cute and I had a good time. It felt very, very insta-lovey. It was very quick. I don't know. I feel like I understand that some people have big emotions very quick when they first meet someone, but it just didn't seem realistic to me personally. I just felt like I needed a bit more in between and them just like absolutely falling head over heels in love with each other pretty much immediately. But it was a fun time, like I said, and I read it really, really fast. I enjoyed my reading experience of this one. And then I read Hopeless by Elsie Silver. I still haven't got a physical copy of this one. I read this on my Kindle. This one is the final book in the Chestnut Spring series, and I'm really gutted that I finished this series. I think it is my favourite ever series, my favourite romance series without a doubt. I adored it. I love this series so much. This book follows Bo, the final Eaton brother that we have not read from yet. He was in the military and he ends up in a relationship with Bailey, who works behind the bar that he goes to quite often. Bailey's part of a family that are quite rough. They're not seen very highly in the town. Her brothers and dad, they're not regarded very well at all, and they are just kind of a group of wrong-uns, to be honest. And she's kind of seen in the same way, despite being a very different person to them. She doesn't really associate herself with them, but because of her surname, she's just very much disliked. This is an age gap romance. She is 22, he's 35, and people do seem to have an issue with that. But the thing, I get that 25 is a little bit older than 22, but Heartless has the same age gap. I'm pretty sure anyway, because I'm pretty sure Willa is 35 and Cade is 38, so it's the same age gap, but it's just because Bailey's that little bit younger than Willa that I think people don't seem to like it. But Bailey seems very mature for her age, and I do think that their relationship worked really well. I thought this was so sweet. I really, really enjoyed this one. I rated it 4 stars. Bailey is a virgin in this one, and I know some people also don't like that. I do think it was handled in a good way, though, in this book. I don't think that it was kind of made to be. I guess it was a big deal, but it wasn't made to. It wasn't done in a cringy way, is what I'm trying to say, basically. Because there are a lot of books like that that I just find really, really cringy. To me, this wasn't. I really liked this. I really like these two as a couple. It's essentially, and I've missed the main point, it's a fake dating story. They pretend to be engaged because Bailey is not getting anywhere. She wants to get a new job. She wants to go to college. And she kind of makes this point to Beau that because he's an Eton, he can get what he wants in the town. The town love him. So he's like, well, I'll make you an Eton then. And they basically fake date and they're going to get fake married. They end up falling in love and it's just gorgeous. I loved it so much. I rated this one 4 stars as well. As I say, nothing could be Heartless for me. That was top tier. That is my favourite romance ever. I adored it, but this one was so good. Then I read another book. This one's a graphic novel through NetGalley, and I didn't like it. I rated this one a 2.5 stars. It's called How Could You by Ren Strap, and I guess the reason why I picked this one up is because I wanted to fill the Heartstopper hole in my heart, to be honest. This is a young adult, well, or new adult probably, graphic novel, and it's queer, it's following these young people, and I just thought, this sounds right up my street. I feel like I'm going to love this. The characters were absolutely insufferable. And I get that young people make poor choices, and I get that sometimes young people can do things that aren't going to be liked by many, but wow, this was too much. I really didn't like the characters in this, and it was just a bit of a letdown, to be honest. I That's probably on me for going into this thinking that it could compare to Heartstopper when it really, really could not. But yeah, as I say, I rated that one 2.5 stars. I didn't love it, but it was a quick read, if anything. Then I surprisingly read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I did say in one of my previous videos, it was a video where I spoke about popular books that I would never read. I mentioned The Housemaid in that video. However, my nan decided to pick The Housemaid for our book club, and who am I to tell her that I am never reading that book? I'm not. So I read it. And I rated it 3 stars. I surprisingly liked it. Didn't love it, but I did like it. I thought it was all right. We're following is it Millie? I think it's Millie. Millie, as she gets this job working for this family, and the woman that she works for seems really, really unlikable, is a bit of a bitch. How much to say without spoiling this? Things kind of take a turn. She goes there and she starts working. She needs this job. She can't not have this job, and she's going to really struggle finding another job. So she can't. She's kind of stuck in this position, and yeah, things just go from there. And I will say, skip ahead like 10 seconds or so if you don't want to know what book this is exactly the same as. Skip now. It's The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. I've already read that book. And I did prefer The Housemaid, to be honest, but it still left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth reading this, thinking this is exactly the same. I don't know what went on there, but they are extremely, extremely similar. I kind of knew the plot of this one before I even started it, which is why I didn't think I was going to like it, but surprisingly, I didn't mind it. And I will say the ending made me want to pick up the sequel, which I was really surprised about. So we'll see if I actually do get to that. Yeah, I quite liked it. Then I read Remarkably Bright Creatures. This is the first book I read on holiday. I was going to vlog my holiday. I just didn't. I was still feeling slumpy. I didn't think I would. To be honest, I did my August TBR, and I, at that point, thought I was getting out of my slump. And then I didn't read a single book for the first half of the month, over half. I went on holiday in the second half, and that's when I read my first book. I read 4 books in August, and all of those were whilst I was on holiday. So the slump wasn't over, but my holiday definitely helped. So yeah, I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. And it was another disappointment, guys. I rated this one 3 stars as well. This one is about this woman who forms this friendship with an octopus. And I loved the idea because I have read My Octopus. No, I haven't read it. I've watched My Octopus Teacher on Netflix. Absolutely adored that. Octopi are so intelligent, and I thought this was going to be so interesting. This one did leave me a little bit bored. Not really that much happens. People adore this book. I can see why, but yeah, wasn't massively for me. We're following this other guy in it as well called Cameron, I think was his name. I really didn't like him that much, to be honest, but I liked how it kind of all links at the end. That was sweet. But other than that, I just don't really have much to say about this other than the fact that not much happens and I was slightly bored. Which is a shame because I thought I was going to love it. Next, this just seems to be full of disappointments, I'm afraid. But then I read The Butcher and the Wren by Elena Urquhart, and I rated this one 2 stars. I really didn't like this one. I didn't love the writing style of this, and I found it quite predictable, actually. This one follows this woman called, I can't remember her first name, but she's Dr. Wren. She is a medical examiner. She's the one who examines the dead bodies after people have died. Obviously, they're dead bodies. But she's the one who does the examinations, and there's this serial killer called the Butcher, and Dr. Wren is essentially trying to piece everything together. But we also get chapters of the Butcher going about his killings. And yeah, I clocked on to what was going on relatively quickly. I thought it would be an interesting way to go, but because I'd already thought that in my head, then when it actually happened, I was a bit like, I wish it was something else. But anyway, yeah, so this one wasn't my favourite. It was a quick read, but unfortunately didn't love the writing style of it and found it very predictable, as I said. So yeah, rate that one 2 stars. We are finally at the last 2 books, and I rated both of these 5 stars, which I just think is hallelujah. I am so happy that I read these books. I still can't stop thinking about both of them. The first one that I read is my favourite book of the year so far, and it is Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I wasn't going to pick this one up, I won't lie. I read Cleopatra and Frankenstein last year, didn't love it, rated that one 3 stars, thought it was okay. This was incredible. I feel like it's got a lot of my buzzwords that I'm looking for when it comes to what I enjoy in books. We are following these sisters, and one of the sisters has passed away, and we're following the other 3 navigate their lives after this has happened, after they've all lost their sister that they all love dearly. They're all very close, but they're all they do have their moments. They have a lot of arguments, but I feel like it's just very sisterly, but it's probably quite intense, but still. So we're following Avery, Bonnie, and Lucky, and then Nikki is the sister that died. We follow different chapters following each of them separately, and then they all come together to the apartment or house, I think it's an apartment, that they all grew up in, that Nikki lived in when she died. They don't have the best relationship with their parents. Their parents weren't the best, so they kind of relied on each other. Avery's the oldest, and she kind of took her younger sisters on under her. Like, she kind of acted as that mother figure, parent figure for them, and it was fantastic. I absolutely adored it. I'm getting emotional even thinking about it. It was just incredible. I loved this book so much. I love books that follow family relationships, siblings, particularly sisters, which is interesting because I don't have a sister. I have a brother. I don't have sisters, which perhaps is why I'm drawn to books about sisters, because it's the unknown for me. I also love books about grief, and there's a lot of that in here. These sisters, all 3 of them, they're kind of messed up from their childhood growing up and from the loss of someone so special and important to them. It was just amazing. I bought this book at the airport. I spent £15 on this, and I didn't realise how expensive it was because I went into bought it from WH Smith of all places, which I should have just not in the first place because it's expensive anyway. I went in there for a blooming crossword book, left with this, didn't even look, just thought, I want to read that. Then I got to the till, thought, but £15 well spent. It was so worth it. I adored it. I don't think anything's going to beat this year. It's just so, so good. I absolutely loved it. And it was such a pleasant surprise as well, considering I didn't love Cleopatra and Frankenstein. But yeah, this was, the ending made me cry. Like, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful end and very real, very raw, just fantastic. I can't praise this book enough. Like, no, there are no words to describe how much I loved this book. But yeah, an absolute 5-star favourite of the year. Final book that I read, I do have a copy here. I actually found, so someone had left this copy behind on one of the bookshelves at the resort that I stayed at, but it doesn't have its dust jacket. But it's Funny Story by Emily Henry. I rated this one 5 stars. I am so happy because I read Happy Place last year and I didn't like it. And it's the first Emily Henry book that I haven't enjoyed. So I was worried about picking up Funny Story. I just really wanted to love it. And I just saw this book sitting on the shelves and I thought, oh my God, it's right there. I'm going to pick this up. I almost finished this in a day. I found this on my last day of the holiday, picked it up, almost read the entire thing, and then I finished it on the plane home. I loved this so much. This is my new favourite Emily Henry book. I think it's because, and it's quite funny, but Daphne, the main character in this book, reminds me of myself. And Miles reminds me of my boyfriend quite a lot. So it was a really nice book to read. And I have decided, actually, because since reading this book, that fake dating, I think, is my favourite trope. I love it. I just think it's such a fun one. I think if any book has fake dating, I'm going to enjoy it. So we are following Daphne and Miles, and they are, at the beginning of the book, they are in 2 separate relationships. Daphne is with Peter, Miles is with Petra. Peter and Petra are best friends. They have been friends since they were young, their families are friends, and Daphne and Peter are engaged. Peter goes on his stag do bachelor party, comes back and says that Petra is in love with him and he is leaving her to be with Petra, which completely rocks. Like, Daphne left her hometown to go be with Peter. She has no friends in the town. She doesn't know people. Like, she left everything for him and now he's just leaving her. So she ends up moving into Miles's apartment. They become roommates, and then they end up getting this invitation to Peter and Petra's wedding, and they pretend that they're dating and they decide that they're going to go together, and it all goes from there. It was fantastic. I loved this. I loved Miles as a character. Daphne, she has certain relationships in her life, and I don't know whether I want to be really specific, but she has certain relationships in her life that I relate a lot to. So I was a bit emotional reading it. I nearly cried on the plane. I was sat there thinking, like, come on, you need to pull yourself together because I can't sit and sob next to some strangers. I can't do it. It was so good. Beautiful, beautiful love story. I love these 2 together. And like I say, I think it's just because I can see myself and my boyfriend in them. So it's just a really lovely, nice romance to read. And again, it's another favourite of the year. I didn't love this one quite as much as Blue Sisters, but it's definitely up there with my top 3 favourite books of the year. I would say I loved it. So that is it. Those are the books that I read this summer. I ended on a real high, I think, and I'm so excited for my reading for the rest of the year. I'm really, really, really hoping that my reading slump can vanish now. And now that autumn and winter are approaching, I can get really cozy and read some amazing books. Let's hope this 5-star streak continues and I read some fantastic books in the second half. We're already way over halfway through the year. The latter part of the year. But that is it from me today. Let me know in the comments what's your favourite book you read this summer, and maybe I will give it a go myself. If you haven't already, I would love it if you could like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!